Matti, in terms of who are you and where do you come from, and you know, then we'll end up at the sort of the Conor VC Sweden, you know, stuff.
So 26 years in technology, 16 with Nokia, previous speaker.
I think he didn't say Nokia, but I think...
And now 4 years in private equity and venture capital, Permira, European big fund, and Conor Ventures, and then portfolio company chairman for either of those two, 4 of them at the moment.
And how did Alexander's story sort of resonate with your investment sort of philosophy or targets or landscape?
Yeah, Conor invests in that segment, B2B software, deep tech, which of course is a lot what Alexander talked about. I totally agree with his philosophy of do not get too platform caught up with the platform because you're likely to miss it. I have battle scars of being in the Symbian board for 4 years, so, so in that sense. So I agree with that one. I think it's a very, very exciting opportunity. I think it's a platform game, so it's a bit risky for private equity because 2 binary outcomes. But for venture, IoT is very hot. Very hot. Also for us, Conor.
And if we go back to Conor VC a little bit in terms of, you know, what changes at Conor since they have now clearly taken a more Nordic or Northern European view, and you sort of being added to the team, you know, what changes?
I think we're raising for a bigger fund,
okay.
And with bigger fund, of course, comes an expansion into Sweden in particular. We have invested in 20 companies so far already, 8 or 9 are still with us. But Sweden, clearly, in addition to Finland, is one that has great potential. So we do have a new Swedish partner, which I can't say yet who it is, and then me as a venture partner. So we believe that adding complementary entrepreneurial and industrial skills to the great team that we have now already in London and Helsinki will be able us to deploy a much bigger fund with similarly great returns as the previous ones.
And I think you have a view in terms of, you know, what's the conversion or you know, where's the gray area between VC and private equity? What's your take on that? Growth capital, I mean, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think it's first of all interesting that I think many of the classical growth funds have grown a lot in size. So Northzone and Grandam, who we work a lot with, but they haven't added people. So their ticket size has gone up, and there's a hole now underneath, a hole roughly the size of Conor. But of course, so we often partner with them. So second rounds of our very successful companies like Servant here in Finland, we do have then Northzone as a second investor. And I have the privileges, I can then walk on the other side of the table and be the one who looks from a Permira angle on, okay, are these companies that we should buy? I'm chairman of Sint, which is one that has gone through from CPO and Creandum ownership to Nordic Capital. And it's a very different model. And for the founders, there are not too many in this room, but I often say that the 4 or 5 things that you really need to watch out, because the private equity owner is a very different animal than a VC.
And what do you see, you know, being the biggest difference in terms of returns?
Well, private equity takes a lot less risk, has of course a lower threshold of returns as a consequence. I think the biggest difference is typically when you're in a VC world you have 4 or 5 owners, and so, but when you go to PE you typically have 1, maybe 2. And so the intensity and the nearness of the ownership becomes completely different. The VCs usually back the founder and say, we know how to run the business, we believe in you, off you go. The PE firms say, we know this business really well also, and so the intensity of the dialogue is on a completely different level.
And what's your take on sort of private equity becoming more and more sort of vertical oriented or more specific enterprise software, cyber, do you see that happening?
Yeah, I actually see that in VC as well.
Okay.
I think we have the problem of the dry powder problem of I don't know how many trillions it is of unused capital, and for every fund it becomes a how do you specialize. And we see it in Permira. We really focus on technology and very specific sectors there and consumer. In Conor we have B2B, so I think the pattern recognition that you develop by focusing, a typical example of that is how do you price a software company that's going through a SaaS transition, right? Because as we all know, revenue goes like this. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you don't know that, you have a tendency of maybe drawing the wrong conclusions.
Yeah. And what is your sort of story, elevator pitch to the LPs? I mean, where is it? Is it that pocket that now seems to be, that hole that you're filling, or is it the Nordic, or is it?
The elevator pitch is really the pocket, the leading A rounds in the Nordics in B2B and deep tech. I think there is and the other one is that this is all about the founders. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of network in Sweden with our new partner here in Finland and with Chris in London. And when you look at the runaway successes of Conor's portfolio today, Blackwood 7 in Copenhagen, Neo now in the US, but from Malmö originally, Servant here in Finland, they are all companies where the partners established a relationship with the founder even before he founded the company.
Yeah.
And so I certainly believe that minimum 50% of the investment thesis is about can the founder take it to 100-fold size.
And is there something that Conor VC will not do? I mean, is it?
Yes, we won't do gambling, we won't do pornography. We are very selective when it comes to consumer. And partly it's, it's a focus, partly it's the expertise we have ourselves. We have done more hardware in the past. We are being a bit more cautious about it, not excluding it. It's typically when hardware and software gets combined in some IoT, for example. But scaling hardware in Scandinavia or Northern Europe is hard.
And finally, how, what's your feel for Slush this year? I mean, is it from a VC's point of view? Is this a relevant place to be?
Well, it's definitely a relevant place to be, and I was talking to Peter Westerbacka earlier here, and we were at the first one as well, and we both concluded it's a lot more circus than before, but it's good circus. One, of course, has to worry about when it's too big, too big. I don't think we're there yet, but I think the organizers need to be very conscious of that one. Of course, we as participants, Slush is just as effective as you and I decide it's going to be. Yeah. So you can roam around here and do nothing, or you can kind of structure it in such a way. And I think that the organizers are doing a very good job of facilitating efficiency, if you like, in the event, which is important.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Niklas, for joining the EY. Maybe I shouldn't say circus, but the program at EY Lounge. I think, again, coming back to the ecosystem where there are the founders, there are the startups, scale-ups, corporations, and then there of course is the investors.
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing an excellent job. We run across you in multiple different things, and as I said to you yesterday, a great source for recruitment as well. but I think EY has done a very good job of positioning themselves as a relevant party to the mid-sized growth companies, which of course is something that's highly needed in this market and in Sweden.
Yeah. Well, good luck with the fundraising, and
thank you.
Thanks again for
you got any money on you?
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.